Hi everyone, good to see you. In the outer world it's a time of turmoil and difficulty. What is it in your world? It's a time to have a practice. It's always a time, what am I doing? It's always a time to have a practice. So, um, yeah, what is easy or difficult in the outer world? For a long time, here's our koan for today. Ma Zu was one of the great, I guess he was as much as anybody behind the founding of the koan work, a big notable teacher. And he, at a certain stage, his teacher suggested he go off and start a temple and spread the dharma himself. And he went to a faraway place, and nobody heard a peep out of him for years. He sent someone to listen to one of his talks and see how it went. After you've heard his talk and it was time for questions, go up to him and say, "What is it?" And so that was his whole message. He traveled halfway across China for this. And so then he went to, Ma Zu said, since the troubles, it's been 20 years of getting by, but I've never lacked for salt and sauce. So, never lacked for salt and sauce, that which gives life its flavor. So just feel inside yourself, and what's really going on for you? What's the salt and sauce right now? I've never lacked for 20 years. I've never lacked for salt and sauce. And just hear what's coming to you. The sounds, tremendously marvelous, the sounds of the world. It said that Guan Yin hears the sounds, Guan Shiyin hears the sounds of the world. Kan Zeon. I've often thought of that as, it's consoling that somebody's hearing all the cries and the sounds. But it's also true that that's her participation in the world, her meeting the world, her welcoming the world. It's for her as well. So I've been thinking a lot of things. Whenever there's a big event in the world and, war breaks out again in Gaza and Israel, and people always want to decide who's to blame and how to, and so on. And so, yes, but on the other hand, and stuff. And I think one of the great things that, salt and sauce, getting by, there are different versions of this koan. One says 30 years, but the most likely version is 20 years. It's been 20 years since the Troubles. And the scholars argue about maybe there were Troubles 350 years ago, and maybe the words he's using refer to them. But 20 years before he's speaking, there was a great war, civil war in China, and people were massacred, and people starved, and babies were killed by the bandits and soldiers, and it varies, but up to a third of China, people in China died, didn't survive that time, between hunger and warfare and murder and so on. And so we can look around a lot of places today and see that, that's going on. And I think it's part of human life that goes on. So just to say, and I think, what do we do? What do I do? I can't affect that stuff very much, I can't, getting outraged doesn't seem like a very Zen sort of thing. Doesn't seem very helpful, And so and there's always explanations of, yes, but the causes and so on. But I don't know. I don't believe that when I bring it up in my own life. So I think what I do is hold a path for people to join. People can come and sit. Anybody can come and sit. And that was the old Chinese way. If there were warring sides, they could all come and sit, but they had to leave their arms outside, And the sorrow of that would just be held in the meditation, the tremendous sorrow of, for everybody. And the reasons, they come and go, but the sorrow is there. And so I think, I'm old enough now to think, well, what do I think I'm doing here? What do I think? Is this any help? Whether accurate or helpful, what I think I'm doing is holding a path for people so people will have refuge without explanation, without blame, without shame. People can come and sit, and we'll teach the Dharma. And I hope that gets passed on, and we have younger people passing it on. And I feel tremendously touched by them doing that. And so I think that's what we can do, is say that people even know there is a path is a profound thing. I think of a guy, I ran into his poem. He wrote a book of poems, and he wrote it under an assumed name, and I somehow, I'm not even sure what his actual name is, but he was an Iraqi, and he had said bad things about the government at the time, and he was a Shia, so he was somewhat in disfavor, and anyway, he got captured and tortured, and was in prison for about a year, and his teeth were pulled out and things like that. But just the torture, his best friend killed in front of him and things. Just the cruelty of being human. But his brother sold a house to bribe people to let him out, and so they let him out of prison. But he knew if he hung around for more than a few days, he'd be back in prison. So they found some Kurds are these remarkable people who do weird stuff. And anyway, some Kurds said, well, we'll take you over the mountains to Iran. And he said, how long it will be? And he said, won't it be hard? It's winter and all. They said, it'll be hard, but it'll just be one night up there, and then we'll be down into Iran. Nobody will want to kill you there. And he said, okay. And so they go up into the mountains, and 4 days later it's still snowing, and they're still in the mountains and slogging along, and they don't have any real clothes, and he has no real shoes, and getting frostbite, and he said, you told me it would be only a day and a night and a day. He said, brother, if we told you what it would be like, you wouldn't have come. And when he told me that, I thought, well, that was a kindness they did for him, because now he's alive, And so those kind people. And then as an Iraqi, he was immediately thrown in jail as a spy in Iran. And eventually he managed to somebody bribed somebody, and he escaped from Iran into Pakistan. He was thrown in jail again as an Iranian invader. And Amnesty International got him out. So every year I give some money to Amnesty International. And then I knew him, and he used to sing Sufi songs, whenever I did some retreats with him. And his teeth, he had false teeth, but when he got really moved, he'd take out his teeth and sing. So he's a wonderful person. But he'd wake up the whole camp singing, Dawn has secrets to tell you, And but his first name was really Mahmoud. But I'm not sure if I ever found out his real name, because he was so phobic about that. He never wanted to go back to prison, so it was touching. So anyway, I'm thinking of him. And thinking of Imre Kertész, the great Hungarian writer who was in Auschwitz, and he said, it's wonderful that, like, he just had to be present. He just had to be there to survive. He just had. And he said, I experienced and starving to death and people being killed and burned in the chimneys and things like that. And he said, I experienced my most radical moments of happiness in the concentration camp. You cannot imagine what it's like to be allowed to lie in the camp's hospital, have a 10-minute break from indescribable labor. To be very close to death is also a kind of happiness. Just surviving becomes the greatest freedom. And somebody said, why did you go back to Hungary after the war? Because there were pogroms people were still killing Jews in Hungary after the war. He said, I don't know, I'm just like an old dog who just went home. And he survived, he said the fact of just the taste of life, as everything gets stripped away from you. You look at the sky and it's beautiful. And he said, as these thoughts would come, I'd like to live a little bit longer, just another day in this beautiful concentration camp. He says, life has only to be accepted temporarily. In other words, we can't control the whole thing, the narrative. But every day, temporarily, but every day afresh. And every day evermore, temporarily, until we have lived to the end of our temporary lives, and one fine day we temporarily die. A person's true meaning of expression is his life, her life. So what we do with our lives is our true. I think that's kind of nice, don't you think? And then he writes about the other strange horror that after, 10 years after he returned from the Nazi camps, all that remained of that experience were a few muddled impressions, a few anecdotes. So we forget, and that's part of the thing that happens, we forget. The Greeks thought that. The Greeks said that. Greeks saw forgetting as kind of a blessing, really. But the end of the Iliad, while he's been away, Odysseus has been away for 10 years and then another 10 years trying to get home. He's been 10 years at war, a war he didn't want to go to and was conscripted into, and then 10 years trying to get home. He finally makes it home, and his rivals have taken over basically the palace and the kingdom, and by subterfuge and warrior skills and so on, he kills them. And so there's a great massacre. So he ends, his homecoming involves this huge massacre of people who would admittedly kill him if they knew who he was. Then he goes up the hill to visit his father, who's been exiled to live with the pigs, And the families of the people he's killed had come after him, enraged, brandishing weapons. And Athena appears, the goddess of wisdom and calmness and counsel, and she just makes everybody forget. Everybody forgets all the wrongs they've done to each other. So that was the Greek solution. I don't know. As a Zen person, we don't have to know what the solution to sorrow and pain is. We just put the next foot forward, And not knowing is a kind of marvelous solution, really. I want to read a couple of poems. Louise Gluck died, who's, a great figure, at least to me, and she's a kind of wild person because her poetry is so brilliant, but so held off from life, And anyway, she just died. One of her great stories is that when she was a teenage girl, she was anorexic, but she was fiercely anorexic. She weighed like 79 pounds or something, a skinny little creature about to die, not eating, and the mysteries of that. Somehow she got into psychoanalysis, and she said it saved her life because she started thinking about her thinking. Why do I think this? Why do I like that? And so I guess she was a long time in psychoanalysis and stayed alive and became a great poet. And her particularly her later poetry there's always a kind of drifty quality about her poetry. And this is a very late poetry, it's even more drifty, but you can tell it's almost like she lived on the edge of a bardo, a between worlds thing. I had left this is called a travel diary. It was published in 2018 fall. I left my passport in an inn we stayed at for a night or so, whose name I couldn't remember. This is how it began. The next hotel would not receive me. A beautiful hotel in an orange grove with a view of the sea. How casually you accepted the room that would have been ours, and later how merrily you stood on the balcony, pelting me with foil-wrapped chocolates. The next day, you resumed the journey we would have taken together. The concierge procured an old blanket for me. By day, I sat outside the kitchen. By night, I spread my blanket among the orange trees. Every day was the same, except for the weather. After a time, the staff took pity on me. A busboy would bring me food from the evening meal, the odd potato or bit of lamb. Sometimes a postcard arrived. On the front, glossy landmarks and works of art. Once a mountain covered in snow. After a month or so, there was a postscript, X sends regards. I say a month, but really I had no idea of time. The busboy disappeared. There was a new busboy, then one more, I believe. From time to time, one would join me on my blanket. I loved those days, every one exactly like its predecessor. There were the stone steps we climbed together in the little town where we breakfasted. Very far away, I could see the cove where we used to swim, but not hear any more the children calling out to one another, nor hear you any more asking me if I would like a cold drink, which I always would. When the postcards stopped, I read the old ones again. I saw myself standing under the balcony in that rain of foil-covered kisses, unable to believe you had abandoned me, begging you, of course, though not in words. The concierge, I realized, had been standing beside me. "Do not be sad," he said. "You have begun your own journey, not into the world like your friend, but into yourself and your memories. And as they fall away, perhaps you will attain that enviable emptiness into which all things flow, like the empty cup in the Tao Te Ching." "Everything has changed," he said, "and everything is connected. Also, everything returns, but what returns is not what went away. We watched you walk away, down the stone steps and into the little town. I felt something true had been spoken, and though I would have preferred to have spoken it myself, I was glad at least to have heard it." And it goes, this is a longish poem, but you can tell it's all about being in the bardos, it's all about being halfway between life and death, And it's incredibly compelling, and sometimes I find it annoying as well, because it's a little bit, the poem is a bit anorexic too, It makes me wonder about myself for liking her poetry so much. And what else? I want to read, there's a poet that we don't hear of much anymore, but who won a Nobel long ago, who's a Sicilian poet, Salvatore Quasimodo. He's really interesting, to me, an interesting poet. And here's a poem of his called "Far from Everything." "Here, far from everything, the sun beats down upon your hair, rekindling its honey. Here, far from everything, the sun beats down upon your hair, rekindling its honey, and from its bush already the last cicada of the year summons us mortals. The siren, too, which wails its deep note of alarm across the Lombard plains. Ah, voices desiccated by the air, what would you have of us? Trouble once more rises from the earth." So, trouble once more rises from the earth. And here's a kind of, what I think of as a kind of hopeful poem, that somebody understood this, or a couple of poems maybe, stood this stuff. And where have we here? That's all the other Louise Glick material. This is, this is Stanley Kunitz. People keep sending me Stanley Kunitz poems, so I thought I'd read one to you. And Stanley Kunitz is the only person I dreamed once that I found a lost poem of his, which I thought was kind of cool. and I have a poem about it, which maybe I'll read one day, but it was about a koan. It was about how to translate a koan, certain koan. So this is called "The Longboat." "When his boat snapped loose from its mooring under the squeaking of the gulls, he tried at first to wave to his dear ones on the shore." You can see this is the same theme as Louise Gluck's poem. "Tried to wave to his dear ones on shore, but in the rolling fog they had already lost their faces. Too tired even to choose between jumping and calling. Somehow he felt absolved and free of his burdens. Those mottos stamped on his name tag, conscience, ambition, and all that caring. He was content to lie down with the family ghosts, in the slop of his cradle, buffeted by the storm, endlessly drifting. Peace, peace, to be rocked by the infinite, as if it didn't matter which way was home, as if he didn't know he loved the earth so much he wanted to stay forever." As if he loved the earth so much, he wanted to stay forever. So that does, objecting to death does involve, in some way, praising life. So. And this is William Merwin, who was one of the first people I sat Zen with in America. "Echoing light. When I was beginning to read, I imagined that bridges had something to do with birds and with what seemed to be cages, but I knew that they were not cages. It must have been autumn with a dusty light flashing from the streetcar wires and those orange places on fire in the pictures. Now indeed it is autumn. The clear days not far from the sea, with a small wind nosing over dry grass that yesterday was green. The empty corn standing trembling, and a down of ghost flowers veiling the ignored fields. And everywhere the colours I cannot take my eyes from, all of them red, even the wide streams red. It is a season of migrants flying at night, feeling the turning earth beneath them. And I woke in the city, hearing the call notes of the plover, then again and again before I slept. And here, far down river, flocking together, echoing close to the shore, the longest bridges have opened their slender wings. Hearing the call notes of the plover, then again and again before I slept, and here, far down river, flocking together, echoing close to the shore, the longest bridges have opened their slender wings. Yeah, I think I try to think as little as possible, actually, but so that my mind is free. I find my life always wants to explain events. My mind always wants to explain events, and I find that then it objects to its explanations, And so we can't explain, we can't find. It's just not in the nature of life. Not knowing is most intimate, goes the famous Zen koan. Not knowing. I do not know. What is the first principle on which we can assess and judge and make the ultimate narrative of our life and find who is to blame and who should be rewarded? Bodhidharma felt the first principle, I do not know. So I think we should meditate a bit. I have a close friend who comes up sometimes and we talk, and the nice thing about, because I live basically in a temple, then the world comes in like that with this rush of sorrow and outrage and things like that. And that, all that's good. And but then at a certain stage, it's good to just sit, and then the garden takes it all, and the temple takes it all, and there's nothing more, and we're in the silence together. We're in a deeper communion than if we're working everything out, The beauty of the temple bell, the eternal sound. When the Grand Master Mazu left to start his own temple, no one had heard a peep from him for years. His teacher sent someone to check on him. After he had given a talk, the emissary asked Mazu, "How is it?" After Mazu had given a talk, there was a chance to approach the august teacher, and he said, "How is it?" And Mazu replied, "Since the war, since the time of troubles and turmoil, it's been 20 years of getting by, but I've never lacked for salt and sauce." So just sit with whatever comes up, just feeling your own life and feeling underneath your own life. There's a space underneath everything we're feeling and thinking, all the hopes and sorrows of life, all the demands we make on it. There is a spaciousness, and it holds us and embraces us. So relax if you can. It's always a good idea. When in doubt, try a little less hard, in the matters of the inner life. It's been 20 years since the Troubles. It's been 5 minutes since the Troubles. The Troubles are due in 5 minutes. It's been 20 years since the Troubles. I've never lacked for salt and sauce. Only you can know the beauty of your life. Only you can know what this next breath is. No one else can know. It's for you. Whatever you're feeling and thinking, whatever you're objecting to, whatever you're grasping for, it's for you. Just feeling the meditation come to us, and our thoughts rise and try and exist as a whole life, but then it's not really in them to do that. And they disintegrate and fall away. In a certain sense, that's our task, is to wait them out and to ally with the emptiness, with the freedom, with the capacity of life to dissolve sorrow and dissolve outrage and dissolve being right. And dissolves being wrong too. So wherever we were, we're here. And we're allied with being here. We're being held by being here. It's a simple task in life. It's somewhat akin to love. Loving this moment here. I started cooking Chinese dishes of various kinds, and I like eggplant, and I thought, well, Chinese are good at that stuff, so as are some people in the Middle East. But and then I found, I never thought how many kinds of soy sauce there are, like depends what province you're from, and certain provinces are intensely loyal to theirs and really look down on other provinces, the other soy sauces and things. They're sort of great. And miso, it comes from the old temple days, for me. But how many kinds of miso there are? How many ways to screw it up if you're not attentive to when you're cooking? So you boil the miso, it loses its nourishment. So all the different kinds of salt and sauce in our lives, and just looking at, I have a garden, and just sitting in the garden and feeling the old ancestors with me, and like that's a good thing for me. Tess, do you have anything to say?
I want anything. I like that. Maybe some sauce, do you say? I don't know, you said this a number of times at the beginning, but I noticed during the meditation, I just kept coming back to how many times in my life difficulty and sweetness, or difficulty and sort of richness, have accorded with each other. And that from the outside, it's easy to say, oh God, something's so horrible. And it's not that it might not be horrible, but from the inside, I just think of times I've either been incredibly sick or gone through something incredibly difficult, or been incredibly hungry, or been desperate to lie down, or, and have that pushing through something. And then how that kind of opens me, or humbles me in the face of what might appear, that moment of lying down, or of being able to breathe again, or of tasting something, or of just and I was thinking of some friends of mine many years ago got married, and it was a really strange circumstance where they got married out in the desert, and right before the ceremony was about to begin, this enormous black clouds just started rolling in from everywhere, and everyone had to pile into the bar and start drinking, and and just saying, oh God, what are we going to do? And these enormous hail balls, everything. I mean, it was biblical almost, the way that this happened, and everyone's, and then all of a sudden, after about, I don't know, half an hour, everything just cleared. And, all the guests went, all right, well, is it all right, safe to go out and do the ceremony? And they walked each other down the aisle, and just as they were about to go down the aisle, a double rainbow came out and behind them as they were coming to walk each other down the aisle. And it was a weird circumstance and beautiful in and of itself, but right after this happened, within the next 2 to 3 years, one of the couple's brother, very young brother, got sick of colon cancer and died within 6 months. Her uncle died. One of them had to have major surgery. The mother, who was the mother of the brother and sister of the uncle, had a massive sort of, and you just kind of go like, oh man, like, can these people catch a break? You know, it was almost like the storm. And almost in a freakishly synonymous way, it was like at some point everything just cleared. And they had these two little kids arrive in their lives, and everything started to open in a different way. And you could feel the way that everything that they had been through and shared and sort of stripped down in themselves just opened them to this sweetness that arrived in their lives. And I don't know, just the way that both, it seems like it's never the end of the story, whatever's happening, but how everything just continues to shape us while we're being in the grip of it. So, thanks.
Very good. Lonnie, do you want to say anything? Hi, nice to see you on.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I'm just loving this. It's so real to me right now. And I feel what Tess just said, the joy that is happening at the same time as great difficulty is quite astounding and so beautiful. And I guess that's really all I need to say. I'm just experiencing a tremendous amount of beauty in the midst of great difficulties. And I appreciate this a lot.
Just out of kindness, if you don't mind, tell people. Not everybody probably knows what you're doing and what's going on. And could you just give the headlines?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, my husband of 52 years has suddenly been sort of stricken down with a pretty serious terminal brain tumor. And we've been going through this for 8 months. And it has felt at times impossible, but the impossibility of it, I've realized it's just as impossible to be here, to be in this life. And we have found, a great deal to love and appreciate in these really tough moments. That's basically it. And it doesn't feel any less miraculous. I just can't believe I'm saying this, but all of life just feels, and I've heard you say it so many times, John, but the miracle of us being here, the impossibility of us being here, it's the same. So it's quite an amazing situation, and I'm super grateful for all of you guys to be all in this together, as I know we really are.
Thanks, Lonnie. Very good. John Joseph, do you want to say anything?
I felt that line in the poem you read, the lying down with the ghosts of our ancestors, was so powerful, coming on the back of the talk of the war. And yesterday we chased the eclipse, and we had 20 minutes to go to the peak, and we hopped in the car and started driving, looking for some blue sky, which we never did quite find. But I started texting with a friend, and so I think he was more in the center where he got the almost full eclipse, and he sent me a really interesting picture, and it showed the shadows of during an eclipse, where if it's a partial eclipse, each shadow is cut out a little bit. So each shadow is a reflection of the sun and that which it shines on. And I thought that, we get these whole shadows and we don't realize it because the sun is whole, and then that sun is shining on Palestine, and the sun is shining on Israel, and you were talking about what are we to do, and it just seems like we must lie down with the ghosts of our ancestors. That's what we do.
Very good. I do think that the prescription for me, the thing about walking a path and bringing other people into it and holding a path for people is the gift I can give. And I'm sure there are better gifts or other gifts. I don't know if there are better gifts, worse gifts, but that's what I can do. And that's what we can do. We can come together. Think of the old I was very struck when I first, was part of a tea ceremony, and often, sometimes very casual and simple. There's a story about Soen Nakagawa doing a tea ceremony, like he was saying goodbye to people at the airport, and he rushed into the bathroom and got some hot water out of the tap and came back and mixed tea and did a very formal tea ceremony, sitting down on the concourse while people walked around them, as a way of saying goodbye, But also in the old days, people had to leave their weapons outside the tea house, because so they wouldn't kill each other, and something they were actually quite likely to do. So they're warriors, and on different sides, and they could come together and have tea, and nothing else existed, No shame or disgrace exists, and so that's the beginning of Zen, really. That it's before. We don't carry an identity with us. We're free of that. We're pure already. We're already innocent, It's been 20 years, it's been 20 centuries, it's been 20 minutes of getting by. It's been since the beginning of this meditation. Wow. Getting by. Getting by always means being here, doesn't it? Here. And where's that? It must be here, where we are. In our hearts, here. I've never lacked for salt and sauce. What is it makes life worth this, worth what we go through, worth the work and the sorrow? Never lacked for salt and sauce. This is Amachai. In the street on a summer morning, I saw a woman writing on a piece of paper spread out against a locked wooden door. She folded it, tucked it between door and doorposts, and went on her way. I didn't see her face, nor the face of the man who would read what she had written, and I didn't see the words. It's sort of our human condition, On my desk lies a stone with the word Amen on it, a fragment of a tombstone, a remnant from a Jewish graveyard destroyed 1,000 years ago in the town where I was born. One word, Amen, carved deep into the stone, a final hard Amen for all it was and never will return. A soft singing Amen, as in prayer, Amen and Amen, may it come to pass. Tombstones crumble, they say, words tumble, words fade away. The tongues that spoke them turn to dust. Languages die as people do. Some languages rise again. Gods change up in the heavens. Gods get replaced. Prayers are here to stay. Prayers are here to stay. Here's great Milosh, Czeslaw Milosh, and here's his salt and sauce for him. An hour. And he's somebody who'd been through pretty much under the steamroller of the 20th century. So, leaves glowing in the sun, zealous hum of bumblebees. From afar, from somewhere beyond the river, echoes of lingering voices. And the unhurried sounds of a hammer gave joy not only to me, and the unhurried sounds of a hammer gave joy not only to me. The bong, bong, in distance a hammer. Someone's building something somewhere, Before the 5 senses were opened and earlier than any beginning, they waited, ready, for all those who would call themselves mortals. So these sounds waited for us even before we were born, and we could walk into them. He's kind of an alchemist, Milosh. So they waited ready for all those who would call themselves mortals, so that they might praise as I do life, that is, happiness. I've never asked, I don't think I've called on you, Yasmin, but would you like to say anything?
Hello. So good to be here.
Well, it's very good to have you. Thank you. Well, with that, the only thing we can do now is sing. So it's like, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
John.
Thanks, everybody.